Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into Honor the Land, episode 2. Max Loeb, Loeb's Leads, and Chef Zay, post week 1 of Cleveland Browns training camp. Obviously, training camp, you can only talk about so much, but there absolutely are takeaways. We're going to talk about those. We're going to answer some of the questions you guys had for us on the socials, and we're going to give you a little brief look ahead to week 2 of training camp, and potentially the first preseason game of the year because it's in 11 days. And the day you guys are hearing this on Thursday, NFL football is back, the Hall of Fame game. Bears, Texans, I will be there. I am pumped. Zay, how was your first week of Browns training camp other than busy? Because I know it was really busy.
I'm already tired. Like, I'm not tired of training camp, but I'm tired of all of the stories. I'm tired of all of the chitter chat. I'm tired of all of the speculation because that's all we got. It's just practice. These guys are out here working out the summer kinks, and there's a story for everything. And then one story's more intense than the other, than what you would think that the story that should be more intense is getting underlooked because they'd rather go to the negativity side of it.
Yep.
So I'm already in that boat where I'm just like, man, quite frankly, I don't even want to watch preseason because that's just going to add more fuel to the fire. So I'm at that breaking point. Not, I won't say breaking point yet, but I'm close to the breaking point of getting ready to go off on some people. But other than that, I'm excited. Football's back. Great to see. Obviously, uh, the highlights. DeShaun Watson bouncing back after
Mm-hmm.
the shoulder scare that everyone was up in there. But ready to see these guys up close and personal, honestly. So
Yeah, I'm really surprised you said that. The first thing I was going to say was it has been like overwhelmingly positive, like almost too positive. There haven't been like, oh, this guy looks terrible. Knock on wood, this doesn't happen. This guy
mhm.
looks terrible. All this bad stuff. Like, I haven't seen it, especially compared to years past. It's only the first week, and I think there were maybe 2 practices where there were team simulated reps. So, like, it's super, super early, way
Mhm.
too early to tell. But I'm surprised you said the negativity. Were you beefing with people in the comments about some stuff?
It, the Deshaun Watson thing is just, if this dude picked up his shoelace the wrong way and did bunny ears instead of just the regular loop, swoop, and pull, they would find a way to make it the top story of everything. And the biggest thing that I have been seeing is oh my God, his shoulder it's fine. Like, why are we talking about a pass? Literally one pass and on a drill that it was at the end of the day. Why is that the biggest concern for right now? Like, I just don't understand it. And then he comes out and has a flawless day the next day, and it's just nothing. There's no rah rah. There's no overhype or underhype. It's just there. I don't know. I just, maybe I'm too locked in on the quarterback situation because that's ultimately the biggest question mark. But I don't know. I'm just tired of it.
Yeah, I think the quarterback situation being the biggest question mark is the reason that people do it. Like, people wake up and hate. Hate gets clicks. Like, making
Hmm.
fun of athletes gets clicks. It's the reality. But the the quarterback situation, I know you reacted to this graphic on PFF, like saying, "Oh, the quarterback is the big issue with the Cleveland Browns." Like, we got to take a deep breath here, guys. Like, it's August 1st, July 31st when we're recording, August 1st when you guys are hearing this. We have a full month until the NFL season starts, and we're freaking out about somebody missing, like you said, one pass
Hmm.
in one of the first training camp days. At the end of practice, we work on the fatigue with the shoulder as well. Like, that's a real thing. And we're like freaking out. That was really the only negative thing I saw.
And I think I'm probably just running away with that, honestly, because it's the biggest story that I seen. Like, nothing else is getting where, like, and like, to the point, when in our mailbag we'll get into it about taking a step forward or backward. I think it leads right into this point. It's just as like, for once we're not seeing anything that we can be like, man, this is bad. Like, there's no coaching chaos, there's no player controversies. All the players are under contract for the most part, besides JOK. Like, everything that you want in an organization is here in the Cleveland Browns city. And I just think we're like the dog that caught the rabbit. We don't really know what to do in this situation other
Yeah.
than do what we've been doing for the past 25 years.
It's a great point too. Yeah, and now that I do think about it, maybe there were some more negative things that come out of training camp, but not from the play itself. Obviously, you have the Greg Newsome injury news, the Dalvin Tomlinson injury news, which, if you guys did not hear, Greg Newsome already underwent hamstring surgery. Sounds like it went well. He posted a video on his Instagram story, I believe 2 days ago, of him going through an agility ladder. Like, it looks like he's moving well. Absolutely hope for week one that he will be back.
Mhm.
And then Dalvin Tomlinson was the other one who already, I believe, underwent a knee scope. Again, not super serious. Doesn't seem like, knock on wood, there was a major injury there, but hope he'll be back for week one. Other than that, though, the positives have been coming left and right. I've been hearing great things about what Mike Vrabel is doing. I'm sure
Mhm.
you know and you've talked about. He's in the weeds, hands-on with a lot of different position groups, being that consultant. I've heard a lot of great things about Jerry Jeudy, how he's fit in that Browns locker room so far. Like, the positives are far outweighing the negatives in the first week of training camp, which is awesome. It's a change of pace, like you said.
I think the best thing that has happened, this could be a little bit of a hot take. I think the chemistry is as best as it's ever been that we've seen in my lifetime. Now, we're not talking about pre 99, but since 99, and I know everyone's going to go right to the 2020 season. And fair enough, I think it's a legitimate debate. But I think that the team that we're watching right now has more chemistry, has never been more comfortable in a situation, has never understood the moment more than what they're in right now. People are matured. Like, they've been through turmoil with guys that have been here from the 2020 roster. I think that 2020 was just special magic, and we as fans, especially Cleveland, love that magic feel. But I don't think there's ever been, as a whole, from the top of the organization all the way down to the people who are working on the fields, the chemistry has never been better. And that is the biggest breath of fresh air that I think us fans aren't really used to.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we'll talk about it in the mailbag as well with the whole like leadership thing. You could talk about DeShaun Watson being a leader. You can talk about Myles Garrett, whoever you want being a leader. But there's so many different leaders on this team. There's so many different levels of respect for veterans, for guys with superior talent, guys who have been in the league for a long time and have won things before.
Mhm.
Like, that also plays into the chemistry, because when you welcome in new guys like Jerry Jeudy, when you welcome in new draft picks like Michael Hall, Zach Zinter, like, you need somebody pretty much at each position group to take them under your wing, to lead them to a place where, as a rookie or as a new player on a new team, they feel successful in some aspect. Like, guys like Zach Zinter, like, I'd be surprised if he plays this year. How do you, as a rookie who's probably not going to play, feel like you're coming into a team and you're making an impact? You're part of the culture, you're part of the team. It's the chemistry and the culture here. It's unbelievable. And I think, like you talked about, Vrabel is playing a huge part in that. Like, he comes from a team where they were really good, kind of overperformed on their expectations, never really had this roster where you thought, hey, we can compete with Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship, but they did. He was a coach of the year, and he got the best out of all of the players that were there. Obviously, they had a little bit of a falling out in Tennessee, and I think if they did not have that falling out, he'd probably still be there. He'd probably still be the coach. So I think that him coming on to Cleveland as a consultant, bringing in new perspectives, bringing in a winning culture, for lack of a better term, because of what he did in Tennessee and obviously being a part of that Patriots dynasty, is really good for the overall chemistry of the team too, because he's been there. You have other guys like we talked about, Rodney McLeod, like guys who have been there, who have won at a higher level than anything that the Browns have seen recently. It's huge for chemistry. And I think there's a belief within this team as well that they can do great things. And that goes farther than anything that we could ever talk about.
I think what I love most about the Vrabel situation is just that, like, there's no expectation from him. He's coming out. I think it was just the past yesterday, the interview. He talked about where there's no role for him on game day. He's just
Yeah.
kind of a guy. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But it's like, when you're seeing these clips of him on the field, know how much of an impact that is, especially knowing it's not just a random guy that's just out here coaching up or being a consultant to these guys. He got a script. They told him they want to work on player development and helping with the scouting department and things of that nature, being hands on. I think one of the biggest players that are going to benefit from it most, we actually saw a clip of him. We already know what he's going to do for the defensive side of the ball, but the fact that you're getting him in the offensive room, I think Kevin Stefanski came out and made that a point. He's sitting in on the offensive side of meetings to give them the defensive side of perspective. And we've
Yes.
already seen the clips with David Njoku and how he's helping him in his blocking. And then David Njoku comes out in his interviews and talks about how anything they need me to do now. It was never that before, I don't think. David Njoku, we knew we had that little rough patch where it was, not the best. But now he's coming out saying anything you need me to do, whether it's blocking, catching, do this or that. He's going to take a step forward in this blocking game. And now you're not just talking about him being a guy that you're just looking to pass to. You can have him in on these running down situations and packages because Harrison Bryant is gone. So I just think he is the secret weapon that we didn't know we needed. And there's
Yeah.
no pressure on him whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. He's bringing in great perspectives too. It's really, really interesting. Like when you think about it from a more practical standpoint, like you're an offensive coach, you're an offensive player, like you want to understand the other side of the ball.
Mhm.
And sometimes the coaches who some of the best offensive coordinators in the history of the NFL don't have as much experience, coaching defense or looking at the defensive from a defensive perspective on an offense. When you bring a guy like that in with Vrabel, he can provide honestly perspectives on both sides, but really for the offense, it adds it's like a leg up. Like it's like a leg up over anybody you're going to see. And I think that the impact he'll have this season really can't be measured. I think it's hard for it to be
Mhm.
measured, but from what we've seen, great things so far. Great things.
He'll get a coaching job somewhere. He said
Yeah.
when opportunity presents itself, he'll be there. But I just think it's weird having these luxuries, man, as a Browns fan, as a Browns organization, because never, ever since I've been alive have we ever had the word luxuries be connected with our team. So it's just
Yeah.
nice.
It is very nice. It is very nice. And week one of training camp in the books. We'll move forward to our mailbag segment here. We got 5 questions for those of you guys who did not see the mailbag video. Whenever we have a mailbag episode, we'll post a little video on Instagram, TikTok. We'll also send a tweet out where you guys can reply in the comments and give us your questions. We took the 5 best. And I mean, to start, I think it's really, really difficult to kind of give a strong answer for this, especially in August. But Tyler asked on Instagram, how elite of a division is the AFC North? And where do we honestly sit right now if all teams are completely healthy, which they kind of are?
hmm Um,
It's the
Obviously,
best division in the NFL, right?
not even a question.
Okay.
Not even a question. I think where you get into the where do we sit, it's one of those things where if you ask a Browns fan, we're sitting at the top of the division, but if you're asking the field, it's more than likely we're probably sitting near the bottom of the division. And I just don't understand that because we were sitting in at 11-6 with a depleted roster. I, Everyone's talking about players coming back and how they're going to have an impact. Joe Burrow being the guy in our division somehow is going to go from the bottom of the division straight to the top, and I've seen it on a lot of people's predictions. But yet the Browns get everybody back, including their $230 million quarterback. That, by the way, was 4-1 in the stretch when he did play, and somehow we get worse. Um, so it really depends on who you ask. If you ask me, if we're not sitting anywhere between 1 or 2, we better be making the playoffs somehow at 3.
Yeah.
Because if not, there's gonna next year. I don't even want to think about that because we're not bringing that negativity around. But
No.
it's not gonna be pretty. So we got to be sitting at 1 and 2, fighting for. I mean, it's a toss up between Ravens and Bengals because I do like Joe Burrow, and I don't want to discredit how great Joe Burrow is, but
Yeah.
we got to be in a 1-2 conversation.
I agree. Let's look at it from a practical standpoint. Top 2 position groups from each team in the AFC North, like quarterback, Lamar Burrow.
Yep,
Probably no debate there. But when fully healthy, running back room, probably Ravens, Browns, Steelers too. It's tough, but you got 3 very equal running back rooms depending on
mhm,
how you look at it. Then you move to receivers or pass catchers as a whole. I mean, I Bengals, Browns, like it. I don't think the Ravens and Steelers are up there with them.
probably give Bengals over the Browns just because they have T and Jamar.
Yeah, and then, but even then, a top 2
Mhm,
in the division unit. Offensive line, when healthy, I don't think there's a line in the division better than the Browns.
I agree.
Defensive line, it's tough. I think Browns and Steelers go hand in hand. The Ravens have a very good defensive line, but Browns and Steelers very close up for debate for that top spot for sure.
Are we deeper than them? Because if we are, I would have to put us slightly above.
I think so. I think they are deeper. So again, regardless, top 2 there. Linebackers is tough because I mean,
We're question marks there.
yeah, there are a lot of question marks. So if you put that aside for the Browns, I mean, secondary,
That's
I don't
us.
think I don't think anybody's close. Not anybody's close. I don't think anybody's competing with the Browns. So like you look at all the position groups, special teams too. Like Dustin Hopkins, unbelievable. Obviously, Justin Tucker's in the division too, but Dustin Hopkins is unbelievable. We wait to see the to what the return game looks like. Corey Bojorquez, when he was healthy, was good. Like you look at just positionally and coaching staff as well. The Browns are towards the top in almost every single category, almost every
Hmm.
single position group. So if you're on the outside looking in, I think the connotation of the Browns being bad in the past really affects how people view them now. And I don't think that's right.
It's not right because we're not like I always make the videos where it's like if you were to say some of these things a few years ago, I'd be right there with you and agreeing in the takes. But like we're talking about an organization that no matter what we do, it doesn't seem like we're going to be able to do anything right because we have progressed. Besides the 2021 year, I even think that you can argue that 2021, 2022 stretch was tremendous for this organization because that was the first real turmoil after you sniff success and you still have people from that organization and from that team in the roots and on this team now, and I think that holds a lot of weight and when you talk about setting the culture. So, I don't know, man. I don't know.
They are should be towards the top of the division. Do they win? We wait to see. But I think anybody on paper is a very difficult thing to say. But on paper, anybody looking at the Browns roster in their right mind can see that. We'll move to a new question, and I think this is a very open-ended question. I'm curious to know your thoughts. Is Deshaun Watson ready to lead? Now, that's a layered question. I think when you think about leadership, it's experience, but its ability to relate to players as well. I think Deshaun Watson has both of those things, but can he back it up with his play on the field? That's my biggest question mark.
And that's what I was gonna ask. Like, what are we talking about? Is he ready to lead? Because he's been leading since he's been on this team, just not the way that fans would like. And what I mean by that is everybody in the locker room has full heart confidence in four. I don't think there's a guy in the locker room that you can point to and be like, yeah, he probably doesn't believe in four. People want to go to war with this guy. But when you talk about on the field, is he ready to lead? I think the first couple years when we seen him, we looked at it and we wanted him to be in that situation where it's like, yeah, this is our leader. He's 230 million. He got to be our leader. And I know it's camp, I know it's practice, but his aura seems like there's something different than the first 3 years, first 2.5 years we seen him. I think that if there's ever been a time for him to lead, it has to be this year.
Yeah.
Because if he doesn't do it this year, they were actually talking about it this morning on the radio. Um, the Browns are going to know after this year if they're going to rock with Ford long term or not. We got a first round pick coming up next year. I'm not trying to go down that rabbit hole, but I think it all ties together. Is if he doesn't get it done this year, if he doesn't lead on the field, it doesn't matter what you're doing in the locker room. If you're not leading on the field, I think Andrew Berry's not going to be hesitant to look the other direction. So
Yeah.
I think he can lead. It's just a matter of waiting until we see it, honestly.
Yeah, I agree with you in the fact that Andrew Berry won't be hesitant to move on. I think I don't even want to talk about this. I'll talk for 10 seconds and I'll stop. I think it's a question for next offseason. How do they get out of it financially? That's the biggest thing. Trade,
Mhm.
whatever. But I agree with you in the sense that it's different this offseason. I don't know what it is. I think he truly does feel now that he has a strong supporting cast around him. Like he'll walk into a week, look at the other defense, look at the other secondary, and think, "Yep, my weapons are probably better than yours." And I
Mhm.
don't know if he's felt that in his entirety here. Obviously, Amari Cooper dealt with injuries last year. He only played 5 games last year. The pass offense of the Cleveland Browns was lackluster for the past couple of years, especially since Watson's been there. And I think there's a lot of fingers you can point to the reasoning behind that, honestly, including Deshaun Watson. But you now walk into a year with Amari Cooper, who's now paid up at least for this year. Jerry Jeudy as your number 2, Elijah Moore as your number 3, who was very productive at the end of the year last year. I don't want people to forget that. David Njoku, who's a matchup nightmare for anybody, and hopefully a fully healthy offensive line. You have backs that can contribute in the receiving game, not necessarily need them to. I think this is the best situation Deshaun Watson has walked into probably in his career. Like, I don't think there was a better situation in Houston. Throwing to DeAndre Hopkins is cool, but like outside of that, I don't think there's been a better overall situation for Deshaun Watson than what he's walking into this season in Cleveland.
Well, let me ask you this though. Did the Flacco situation help or hurt? Because, you talk about he's probably never felt more secure with his options. Did seeing how Flacco came in and made the best out of what he has, and majority of those guys coming back have an impact and be like, dang, okay, I can get it done with this, because if Flacco can come in and throw for 300 plus yards, there's no reason why Deshaun Watson should have any type of leash this year. He should be airing it out. We should see some picks from him, quite frankly, because that means we're airing it out. So did it hurt him or help him?
I think it hurt him in the public eye for sure. Like, I think people look at it, like, if Deshaun Watson has a bad game, probably against a common opponent that Joe Flacco played. Like, let's think like the Jags. I'm trying to think what other common opponents they'll face this year. But regardless, a common opponent, people will pull up the box score from what Joe Flacco did last year. And chances are he had 300 yards and a couple touchdowns. Like you said, he turned the ball over. The offense looked so different too. And I think anybody in their right mind will understand that. Yes, Joe Flacco was able to produce with that supporting cast last year, but it was a different offense without Nick Chubb, without a run game you were as confident in. And we'll talk about Nick Chubb next, but you assume he'll be back at least the first quarter of the season. Like, you assume he'll be back. They'll have the majority of the season with him in some capacity at running back. But I also think logically, like, Deshaun Watson for half of a year sat behind a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Like, he had to have learned some unbelievable things outside of understanding, like, yeah, I can go produce with these guys at any level. I don't necessarily need the alpha weapons. Now I get them. Yeah, I should be able to do this. And that's a confidence thing. It's expectations, and it's a little bit of pressure too, but pressure makes diamonds. And I do think that Deshaun Watson understands where he's at. He learned a lot from a quarterback who's done it for a long time, done it at a high level for a long time. You got to understand that he's learning and he's getting better as a player, especially mentally. So the only way that would hurt Deshaun Watson is in the public eye. And I think when we look at Deshaun Watson, like, that's the only or the majority of the negative connotation. It comes from not us, because we'll defend him, but like a lot of people outside looking in, some Browns fans too, but a lot of people outside looking in, looking at the monetary number he's getting paid and the reality that he's not playing up to that number. We can agree there and think, yeah, well, this guy isn't good. He isn't even as good as Flacco was last year. Like, what are they doing? Pump the brakes. Take a deep breath, everybody. Like, you got to calm down. It's a long season too, and I already know first couple weeks, if they have a bad game against a tough defense, it's going to get ugly.
And that's it, but it feels like it's destined to not happen that way. Like, if it's gonna go right, everything will go right this year, because it's so set up for us to finally control our destiny. There's no reason why we should lose more than 2 games this first 5 stretch.
I agree.
Quite frankly, there's no more we should. If we lose one, and I'm going with Myles Garrett, we shouldn't even lose it because we're at home. Like, we were 8-1 last year. We shouldn't lose this game. Period. They can't squander this opportunity, because the schedule is only going to get harder. And if you don't figure it out this first 5 weeks, and if it does look bad, people are already calling for 5. People want to see Jameis Winston. I'm predicting Jameis. You don't know how many times I'm predicting Jameis Winston by week 3. I'm tired of that too. Like, why are we? You want us to be bad? Because that's what that means.
You want the Browns to air the ball out, and like you said, I don't think that's an exclusive thing with Jameis Winston. I think we're going to see it more from Deshaun Watson. But I'm glad you brought up the first 5 weeks, because Griffin asked us, when will Nick Chubb be back? I think also a very layered question, because when he'll be back in pads is not when he'll be back, getting 10 plus carries a game. But we talked a little bit about it last episode. I personally wouldn't be surprised if he was dressed for week 1. I don't know what it's going to look like in terms of touches, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was dressed for week 1.
you can't trying to figure out what Nick Chubb wants to do is like trying to figure out a 64-sided Rubik's Cube. Good luck. There's probably 1% of people that can do it, and that 1% is the man himself.
Hmm?
Um, when did Jonathan Taylor come back last year? Wasn't it our week 4?
I think it was the week before in some capacity, but it was the first. It was within the first month of the season, and I brought that up last episode too. Like it's different because it's a structural injury for Nick Chubb, and Jonathan Taylor's was more of a if I'm correct at least I know it was an ankle injury, a bone thing. So it's different. Timetable return is different, and I remember he heard it in the summer, but like you're looking at two running backs who potentially could be ready in the first couple weeks of the season. How are they going to get eased in?
See,
And Jonathan Taylor was honestly, I thought the Colts did a really good job, but they also had Zach Moss who played really well.
he was
So
going crazy.
yeah,
But see, that's my thing. It's like, is Andrew Berry and this staff going to allow Nick Chubb to dictate this, or are they going to do what's best on the chessboard? Because if I'm Andrew Berry and I'm all these guys, number one, we know Nick Chubb's contract is based off incentives this year.
yeah,
So that I'm sure is going to factor into the equation somehow. And then it's the other side where it's like, if we do start out 4-1, let's just say we start out 3-0 without Nick Chubb.
yeah.
What rush is there to bring him back when you know are going to need him for that second half journey? Don't we have a late bye week this year too? Or was that
Yeah,
last
I
year?
think no, it's this year. I think it's November. Last year was like week 5.
Yeah. So if we start, I think it really all plans out on these first 2 weeks for sure. If you come out 1-1, I think the conversation becomes a little bit more okay. When are we going to get him back on? But let's say we beat Dallas, and let's say we come out next week at 2-0. Now you're sitting there like, okay, Chubb, take another week.
Yeah.
That week 3 conversation you come in, it's like we might as well just give you the whole month off, come back, start out fresh, and we take this second quarter of the season because Kevin Stefanski and these guys break it down into quarters. Man, I think if we start out 2-0, we won't see him until the second quarter.
Mm, interesting.
And I was on the camp of seeing him week 2, week 3 because of what
Yeah.
we've seen.
Yeah, I think it is certainly circumstantial. I mean, Dallas is the big one week 1, but then you have Jacksonville, that's a game you think you should win. The Giants, that's a game you think you should win. So like starting 3-0 or even 4-0, like it's realistic. It
Mhm.
totally could happen. And if that's the case, I kind of think back to the success last year at the end of the year without Chubb. You're looking at the offense and you're like, and I know people said this. I don't know if people meant it, but I know people said this. Like, do we really need an elite star running back there if we're scoring points like this? Because the reality of the NFL, the way it works now is you don't necessarily, at least not in the payment world, you don't need to pay a running back like that. You can get lesser production elsewhere and invest your resources into other parts of the offense, like your O line. But if they're 3-0, you're right. They're not going to rush him back. And could you imagine the jolt in the leg it would be, if they lose one of those first like 5th or 6th game? I know they're at Philly. I think they play at Vegas too. I think that's going to be a really tough game for them. Could you imagine if they lose one of those games, the next week they're back home and Nick Chubb is back? Like that'd be the shot in the arm they need. I think waiting is probably the smarter thing to do. I don't know if it's going to be a reality because we see him full sprinting at training camp. And I think that's something I'm going to be looking forward to in the next couple of weeks. We'll talk about that at the end, but maybe it's wishful thinking that he's back week 1. But
I'm
if they start out hot, you're right. You got to wait, right?
I mean, you talk about storylines. I'm looking at the schedule, and there's no. If you're talking about getting the best bang for your buck and being like, "Dang, we need Chubb back," you can point to October 13th, the Eagles, but that's week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Yeah.
which he should be back by then. The Giants game, Vegas. Do you bring them? Do you take them on the road trip from Vegas to Washington? Like it they could play this super cautious however they want to do it and it would work out either way, man. But man, I was just trying to think of, is there a game in sight where you could look at it and be like, man, the Nick Chubb game where he returns and just lights it up? I don't Maybe it could be Vegas. Maybe it could be Vegas because they are putting in a lot of hype. I know the social media team is promoting, they got Josh Crib events, they got all type of events trying to send fans out. So maybe that could be the game that we look for September 29th.
That
in
would be
Vegas.
a very, very cool return date, especially if they start out 3-0. They're going to be rolling in their guns a-blazing against that Raiders team. The fourth question we had, we almost answered already, to be honest with you. Talking about Deshaun Watson, is he going to be better than Flacco? And I don't think it's a fair comparison, especially because, like we talked about, bless you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the offense is so different. Like it's an offense now that you're going to play really fast. I think people are going to see a lot more tempo out of the Browns offense. You are going to hopefully air the ball out more, but the reality is it's going to be different than what it was the first half of last year. When Flacco played, I think it's moderately comparable in the world of pass volume. Like I think we both agree the Browns are probably going to throw the ball a little more this year, but it's so different. Deshaun Watson now has different weapons. He's had a full off season. You almost expect him to be good, but then you look at Flacco's numbers and you see average, I don't even know, 300 something yards a game, was slinging it left and right. The reality is he had nothing to lose. Deshaun Watson has a lot to lose. He's a lot to lose.
Now, see, this is where me, I'm a people guy. I like to dissect things. Sometimes people say Deshaun Watson specifically came out and said he's done caring about what the public opinion say. He used explicit language that people weren't very fond of. You know what I mean? And if that's true, we should see. I won't say Joe Flacco esque ish play because you hit the nail on the head. Joe Flacco was playing with nothing to lose. He was
Yeah.
man, he was airing it out regardless. If
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson plays like he does not care about the public opinion, which we cannot say we've seen, because ever since he's strapped up in the brown and orange, it always looks like he's looking over his shoulder. He's on his phone, like he was listening to the noise. So if I'm gonna take him at his word by what he says, he don't care no more. He wants to be like it's human nature. But if he can block out all that noise, and I've been saying this since last year, man, Deshaun Watson going there's no reason why we shouldn't see a top 10 Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
Period. Everything's set up for him to be great.
I hope you are right because I agree with you in the sense that every little thing that can be set up for him to be great outside of having a first year offensive coordinator is set up to be great. Now, Ken Dorsey's going to come in and do a good job. He's been successful with a lot of different quarterbacks in the past, but everything is set up for him to be great. We'll transition into the last little part here, but we'll transition with this final question because as we look forward to the second week and third week of training camp, the first preseason game, I am curious, and so is Jordan from Twitter, who has the most or best chance to grow this season? And on the other side of the coin, who might take a step back? Is it possible for somebody to take a step back?
You must be reading my mind because when I first seen this question and I was thinking about my answer for the take a step back question, I'm going through players and I'm trying to make a case because yeah, you could probably see some type of step back from players. But again, I'm referring back to what Deshaun Watson said. We're not entertaining the negativity. If
Yeah.
we're talking about if the expectation is for us to take a step forward and get to and win a playoff game, there's no margin for error as far as taking a step back. Only progression is going to happen. So my mindset is I'm not even thinking about anybody taking a step back because realistically, we took the step back last year by playing
Yeah.
with injuries. The only thing that we can do is take steps forward. So to answer the step back question, I don't have one. My mindset is set on being better than we were last year, which doesn't tie in. As far as forward on the defensive side of the ball, I got two fan favorites, obviously, and one of your favorites. Alex Wright, I think, has a
Yeah.
tremendous opportunity to take a step forward this year for the simple fact that we already seen him take a step last year. You mix the fact that you've got a bunch of 1 year guys on the line this year. He has a
Yep.
real opportunity to grasp, secure himself a contract, and cement himself across from Myles Garrett for the next few years to come. Another guy that I'm super cool with, D'Anthony Bell, that safety position is also going to have a spot that needs to be filled, seeing as though Rodney McLeod's hanging it up next year. Juan Thornhill is, I believe this is a contract year for him as well. You have Grant Delpit, so that position is open, and I think the other guy, Ronnie Hickman, I can let you do your preaching on him because I think that might be where you're going. And on the offensive side of the ball, I'm looking at Tillman. The same reason I think with Alex Wright, there's a lot of guys that may not be here on the receiver position. Cedric Tillman has that opportunity to be your 1A, 1B guy moving forward if he can take that step. Elijah Moore, I think we've seen a lot of him. And then the last guy I would say, well, Watson for obvious reasons, but
Yeah.
David Njoku. I think there's still people that don't really see him in that top 5 category yet. And I think this will be the year that will cement him in for sure top 5, but hopefully get into that top 3 conversation, top 2.
Yeah, I think those are all awesome calls. Ronnie Hickman is definitely one that I have my eyes on. I think that's going to be pretty opportunity dependent because that DB room is crowded. Obviously, now Greg
Mhm.
Newsome's out for probably the next month or so. We don't really know what it looks like if he'll be back week 1, but somebody's going to have to slide in at nickel. I don't know if Ronnie Hickman can do that, but Rodney McLeod could step in. That could open up a spot in the back end at safety. Who knows? Regardless, I think offensively, DeJuan Jones is the big one for me. I think there's levels to the steps he can take. I think if he shifts over to left tackle, he could be like a game-changing, game-altering talent in the NFL. I think he could be that on the right side too. But if you have an elite, stout left tackle, you have a critical advantage over a lot of teams in the NFL. I think DeJuan Jones, if he can get there, it's a huge step, but there's a pretty darn big step too if he enters a starting lineup as a right tackle. That's the biggest one that I'm looking at. I mean, defensively, Devin Bush is one for me too. I know you're a huge fan of Devin Bush, what he can offer. The every down role, like I talked about last episode, I don't think is a reality. Like I think he'll be a base down and distance linebacker, a who knows, probably a strong side guy who can just go fly around and go make a play on the football when asked. And then, the Browns run defense is as good as it has been when you get into those third and longs, get him off the field, get sub packages in. So I think he can take a step up in terms of finding a role because in Pittsburgh, asking him to be an every down linebacker with the speed and aggressiveness he plays with, almost like reckless abandon, like it was too much for him, I think, at least from what I saw. So I think having a nice little home, playing 30-ish snaps a game, not necessarily being asked to be out there for 60 snaps, I think is going to be great for him. Those are the two guys I'm looking at.
I think if we can get a fraction of what JOK did last year and give that to Devin Bush, because I think ultimately JOK is going to take a step forward as far as um the load on this defense. I think he's going to be asked to do a little bit more, be a little bit more of a leader. Um, Whereas last year it was just, hey, go get me that ball, Petey. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Go get the ball. And I think that's where that Devin Bush role, maybe we're seeing him blowing up for TFLs. Just, hey, we don't need you to read any coverages or guard anybody. Go get the damn ball.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in the perfect world that he does that, JOK will also be doing the same on the other side. And I think if they can shore up that linebacker room, which I honestly think they're making really good progress in doing. And last year, just like looking at it on paper, you compare it to the other like levels of their defense, and yeah, it's clear to see that's the weakest, but it's not like it was weak.
Hmm.
Like in order to have a good run defense, you have to have good linebacker play. And I think Dalvin Tomlinson and the guys inside helped that a lot, but their linebackers were fine in the run game last year. Regardless of what happens in the secondary in the offseason too, like that's another unit you have to expect to be up there. But that is the ideal world where you have two head hunting outside backers on each side where you try to stretch a play out over there. It's like a death sentence for an offense. You got to go run through the middle. And then you have Dalvin Tomlinson, Alex Wright, and those other guys in there to clog up the middle. Like in a perfect world, that this still should be one of the best run defenses, if not the best in the NFL.
I agree 100%. And just one more side note with JOK. I don't know if anybody's seen any of the practice clips of this guy. And I don't know if they have it in like ×2 speed. But I swear every time I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Every time I see a clip of this dude, it always seems like he's going as fast as he can possibly go. It makes me want to run through a wall. So
Yeah.
shout out JOK, man.
He plays fast. He plays fast. We'll transition to the last little segment here. Week 2 and beyond of training camp, week 2 into that first preseason game, which is insane to think that it's in 10 days, 11 days, whatever it is. What are you looking at in terms of practice film, in terms of opportunities, DeShaun Watson? I think just elephant in the room, if Nick Chubb participates in anything, I think everybody will be looking at that. But what else are you looking at?
I got a few things. The first one, since you mentioned Nick Chubb, Who's getting the bulk load at running back? I don't think
Mm.
there's been a clear, defined answer of that
Yep.
yet. Obviously, Jerome Ford. Shout out to Jerome Ford. Just had his bundle of joy
Yes.
at the start of training camp, which was why he missed those couple days. So congratulations to my dog. Um, but you did with the addition of Foreman, we talk about how much of a load that he's been able to carry when he has been asked to. Is he going to get that role? So I'm definitely going to be looking at the running back position. Um, the obvious one is the players, man. We find the practices are opened up to
Yeah.
camp. So, anxious to see him up close. There's nothing like that. But who's going to be the standout guy? Last year, we had obviously Elijah Moore was on every other highlight reel, right? And Austin Watkins took the Browns fandom by storm.
Yep.
So I'm anxious to know who's going to be the separator this year because no one has really there isn't anything in the media where it's like, man, this guy is jumping off the charts because everybody looks so like we were talking about earlier. Everything looks so good. I'm just looking for that guy who's gonna, be the separator.
Yeah. Who do you think it's going to be if you had to give a prediction right now?
I'm hoping it's Tillman, man. I think they're riding. There's a reason why they go to the third round and take their receivers, right? They need to hit on one of those guys. Now, I'm not saying David Bell can't be that guy because I think he solidified his position this year. There should be no question with David Bell, in my opinion. He's earned that right.
He'll be
But
on
I
the
think
roster.
right. So I'm thinking, looking forward, and I just off of what we seen last year, if Tillman can be that separator, man, you're talking about a guy who can not only go over the top because he is fast enough to do it, but you're talking about a height advantage, a red zone advantage, a guy who's now going to be looked at as, hey, if Amari Cooper does walk and take a contract next year, we got Cedric Tillman. So he is the biggest piece as far as I would say that's not paid that I'm looking at because if we get him to go, man, it's this offense gonna be scary.
Yeah, it would be scary, especially in those sets where early on in the season too, if you don't have Nick Chubb, where you're in four receiver and David Njoku personnel and you're going to pass the ball, but it'll be really interesting to see that. I will caution the Browns fans, things I'm looking at. Elijah Moore, I think, is going to wind up on more highlights. I think Elijah Moore, no pun intended, I think Elijah Moore is going to you think about it. Obviously, he's a very good player, but like think about the team settings, what the Browns are going to be doing defensively now. They're going to be trying new players at nickel without Greg Newsome. Players that maybe have played before but are not used to playing nickel. You have a very experienced slot receiver going against those guys. Don't be shocked if you see a lot of reps where Elijah Moore beats somebody who's not the starter across from him. I just want to caution everybody. I think we're going to see that. But the guy I'm looking at to make an impact, because in this Ken Dorsey offense, somebody's going to have to be that Stephon Diggs, like take your 5-yard hitch routes when you can get them. I'm just looking to see if it's Amari Cooper or Jerry Jeudy. Like I don't think it's super far-fetched to say that Jerry Jeudy is going to have that similar role. Like he could be the guy that gets those 5-yard out routes pumped to him. He could be the guy that gets those little bubble screens pumped to him because he's dynamic after the catch. And that's the thing with him, where you have a guy like Amari Cooper who you can go line up as a single on the backside, throw him a fade or hitch, whatever your option route may be, and then have Jerry Jeudy on the other side to catch a screen pass. Like I think it's going to be a nightmare for defenses trying to figure that out too. But I'm looking training camp wise to see which one of those guys, especially in those team settings, because the early team settings, it's a lot of those quick hitches, it's a lot of those screens, the RPOs, things like that. I'm fascinated to see which guy gets more reps. But I did want to preface everything by saying, guys, don't let Elijah Moore's an unbelievable player. Take it with a grain of salt because I do think he's going to be going up against nickel slot guys who are not as experienced as Greg Newsome. That's the reality.
You know what you just described to me with the Jerry Jeudy thing that I think they should look into? It
Hmm.
sounds to me like they need to be running like that Patriot style offense with or Denver when Wes Welker was there.
Uh-huh.
Because if you could Wes Welker was not catching anything down deep and cutting you up in the middle. It was all underneath slot stuff. Like Jared Jeudy is more than capable of creating space and giving you those routes that you're talking about. But I think where it differs and where I think they could pull bits and parts of it is after that 4 or 5 yard hitch breaks down, yards after contact, and not
Yeah.
even just at yards after contact. If the prey breaks down, he has the ability to create more space and go vertical with it. You know what I mean? So they need to they need to it sounds like he should be like a Wes Welker who's a I can't even put him in that same breath. That would be disrespectful.
What were you gonna
Who's a Wes
say?
I was I was gonna say like a Monra because a Monra is
Yeah.
so versatile. You
Yeah,
know what
he
I
is.
mean? He can go over the top, he can go underneath and do it. If he could be an esque of that style, man, who are you gonna guard? You got David Njoku in the scene, you got Amari out wide, you got Jerry, you got Tillman, you got Chubb in the backfield, you got Watson scrambling ability. It's gonna be a nightmare if Jerry Judy is anything what we hope he can be.
Yeah, and I think it also could get to the point. I know we talked about I think it's a far-fetched idea, but the potential of an Elijah Moore trade. Like if Elijah Moore doesn't find a home in the offense right away in their base personnel where it's one running back, one tight end, three receivers, we could get to a world where Jerry Judy does play in the slot and it's Tillman and Cooper on the outside. I think we could get to a world where it's four receivers and a running back, and Njoku not even on the field at sometimes. There'll be worlds where it's four receivers and David Njoku on the field. Like there's going to be a lot of opportunities for Jerry Judy to be placed in different places and be different roles. And there's no receiver on that team that's more capable of doing different things than he is. I really, really would love to see him in the slot because I also think just that's a matchup nightmare for a lot of guys, especially like early downs where if you're trying to match personnel, you're going to have like a bigger nickel out there, like a Sam Starr linebacker. My mind always goes back to that touchdown that Puka Nacua scored against the Browns this past year. They had, I believe it was cover two, and you had Taki running up the middle with him, and it was an early down play. Like you could catch defenses in something like that where your strong side linebacker or whoever's lined up the slot is a bigger body, like maybe a true linebacker like Taki was, and you got to go cover Jerry Judy or like relate to Jerry Judy on a route, you're not going to be able to do that. Like that's an unfair ask. So I think there's a lot of different things they can do with Jerry Judy. I'm fascinated to see the alignment. I'm fascinated to see who's in the slot, like the schematics behind where they're placing players, especially the receivers, is going to be the biggest thing I look for sure.
Oh, the receivers is gonna be a popcorn. Grab your popcorn because somebody's feelings is gonna get hurt, and I'm hoping it's not ours, but or
Yeah.
mine in particular. But what I did want to, since we're on the Judy topic, I've seen it a lot. A lot of people are asking it. What's going on with Judy? Why is he not in the pad? Like, well, there was some hiccup with his with what was his hand leg or something. But
I haven't heard anything other than he hasn't been practicing in full, but at the same time, it was like we talked about what two real practices of team reps. Like, well, I think this week is the gauge on where he is. It's the gauge on where a lot of players are. But I mean, I'd be shocked if he wasn't ready for week one. Like, really shocked.
yeah, hopefully there's nothing there. I just wanted to address it because I know I've seen it asked at least 3 or 4 times, like, "Where's Jared Judy? What's going on with Jared Judy?" And then I was thinking about it. I was like, "Yeah, we really haven't. There's hasn't been any conversation or anything." And I think it's credit to how far we've come again because man, you would hear all of this stuff in recent years.
Yeah. We'll finish by asking you guys who are listening and watching. We appreciate you. And if you made it this far, make sure you're subscribed and following if you're not already. But I'll ask you, Zay, as well as everybody else watching. You lose Greg Newsome and you lose Dalvin Tomlinson. Let's just say first full contact padded practice. Who is going to fill those slots? Who is the nickel? And then I guess who are the two interior linemen you're going to see with the first team defense?
I mean, Cam Mitchell is the first guy that comes into my mind that I think could definitely take that spot. Tomlinson, I don't know. We're just so deep at that position. Maybe Michael Hall does.
Mm.
Maybe he does because hey, he looks. Remember when Jim Schwartz drafted Siaki and was like, "We don't need you to be a Ferrari. We need you to be a dump truck." Isn't that what he said?
Oh, I don't remember that.
Siaki Ika, he said something along those lines where we don't need you to be a Ferrari, we need you to be a dump truck, or we don't want you to be a dump truck, or so something along those lines.
Uh-huh.
I think you got yourself like a Dodge Challenger back there. Like this dude is he's a defensive lineman, so you know he's big, but he be moving on those clips. I'm watching the clips and I'm like, that's Michael Hall. He looked like
Yeah.
a linebacker almost. So maybe he squeezes in there and has an impact, man.
That would be really cool. I'm with you in Cam Mitchell. I think that's probably the most realistic. I think we could see Rodney McLeod too. Would also be fascinated to see if they ever try rotating Grant Delpit down there because I think he's got some good coverage skills. But I don't think, I think that's unrealistic, or at least comparatively to who they have right now. I think D line it's Hurst and it's Alex Wright until further notice, because I do
A D
think,
tackle.
yeah, I think they try to slide right inside.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough because you have the edge depth, like you have Obo Okoronkwo coming off, and there's going to be some sub package things. But I think it'll be Wright, Hurst, Zadarius, Myles Garrett. We wait to see. But Michael Hall, it is fascinating because he is
No, you're
a
right.
big body that can move.
You're right. Mo's gonna get it for sure. I mean, that's already cemented, I believe, and he earned that from last year, and he wanted to be back. So it's definitely Mo. But maybe since the beginning of this schedule is a little bit softer, maybe that's an opportunity to see what you have in your younger guy, and he
Yeah.
could be next to Mo. And Alex stays on the outside. I just think Alex has a very, very good opportunity. And if he's asked to move inside, I don't think he'll have no problem doing that. But he showed some flashes last year on that outside, man. I really would like to see him take that next step because he could ultimately be a piece that you have across from Myles Garrett for the next 3 years at least, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm gonna change my answer. I completely forgot about Shelby Harris, but Shelby Harris and Mo Hurst, because I do think Hurst will get in there. But
Mhm.
Shelby Harris, Mo Hurst on the inside, and then Cam Mitchell at nickel. Like I said, I'm fascinated to see if they rotate coverages in different ways, what their base personnel is gonna be looking like, especially as they get out to more receiver sets, which we think the Browns will probably do because they have a lot of talent at wide receiver. We appreciate you guys watching and listening, though. Again, if you're new, make sure you follow and subscribe. We will have weekly episodes for you, daily content on the socials as well. Honor the Land, the same handle on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, everything you guys need. Zay, any final words before we sign off?
Make sure you guys are locked in. Crockpots on wheels. Next episode, we may actually be in the RV. You know what I'm saying? I just throw that out there, yo. See
Yeah.
in the studio. You still got to come out and
Yeah.
check it out ourselves. But you already know how we got to end it, baby. I
Let's do it.
appreciate you. Hope you had a great day. But 1, 2, 3. Here we go, Brownies. Here we go.
Appreciate you guys watching and listening. We will see you next time.